14-2. That's how the board voted to remove her. No warning. No private discussion. Just a clean, public decision recorded in the minutes. Vivienne Clark didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She simply folded her hands on the table and let them finish. Across from her sat men she had worked beside for 12 years. Men who built the company with her. Men who believed at that moment that they were in control. The chairman cleared his throat. Effective immediately, your role as coup is terminated. A few nodded. One of them even smiled. Vivienne gave a small, almost polite nod. Of course, she said. She stood, smoothed her jacket, and as she reached the door she paused. Not long enough to seem dramatic. Just long enough to make them look up. I assume, she said calmly, that everyone has read page 47 of the lending agreement. Silence. Because none of them. She left the room before anyone asked what she meant. And by the time they understood, it was already too late. The laugh came first. Just a small one, barely a sound. More like air escaping from a room that had been holding its breath for too long. But she heard it. She always heard everything in that room. The vote had just been read aloud. 14-2. And somewhere to her left, a man named Douglas Holt. A man she had sat across from in that boardroom for 11 years. Let out that small, relieved laugh. Like something difficult had finally been handled. Like a problem had been solved. She didn't turn her head. She didn't blink. She kept her hands flat on the table, perfectly still, and she looked straight ahead while the room shifted around her. Chairs scraped back, papers shuffled. Men who had just voted to remove her from a company she had spent 11 years building began gathering their things like the meeting was already over. Because for them, it was. The board chair, Winston Whitfield. 23 years with the company. A man who had looked her in the eye 2 weeks earlier over a lunch she had paid for and told her the board was solidly behind her. Winston Whitfield cleared his throat. Vivienne, we appreciate your contributions. Truly, we'll have HR prepare. And that was where he stopped. Because she finally looked up. And she said nothing. Not a single word. She just looked at him. And somehow, the room got quieter. Welcome to Golden Heart Stories. If you've ever sat in a meeting where the decision was already made before you walked in, stay right here. This one is for you. Her name was Vivienne Cole, 47 years old. Chief Operating Officer of Carlyle Capital Advisors for 11 years. And in those 11 years, she had taken the company's asset management division from $30 million under management to over $400 million. There was a plaque in the lobby with that number on it. Her name was not on the plaque. She had noticed that 3 years ago and said nothing. Because that was the kind of thing you learned to absorb when you were the only black woman at that table. You absorbed the meetings that started without you even though you were the one who called them. The credit that quietly traveled to other people after you did the work. The way certain men would explain your own reports back to you like you hadn't written them. You absorbed it all. You stayed professional. You kept delivering. You told yourself the numbers were enough. The numbers were never enough. The vote to remove her had been organized by Winston Whitfield over 2 weeks. The 2 weeks following a quarterly review where Vivienne had raised serious, documented concerns about a structural problem in the company's largest fund, a debt covenant issue she had been quietly managing for 18 months. She brought it to Whitfield privately, professionally, with a full remediation plan attached. He thanked her, and then spent the next 2 weeks building a case to the other board members that Vivienne Cole had become a liability. The man they brought in to replace her was named Frederick Baird, former Goldman partner. His name appeared in a press release that went out to the media 40 minutes before the board meeting ended, while she was still sitting in the room. She found out because her phone buzzed in her pocket and she glanced down and saw a news alert with her own name in it. She put the phone back. She did not react. What none of them knew, not Whitfield, not Holt, not any of the 12 men who voted to end her career that afternoon, was that 3 days before that vote, Vivienne Cole had made a phone call to a woman named Laurel Voss at a firm called Pinnacle Equity Group about the company's debt. But we're not there yet. After the room cleared, Whitfield approached her. He had the walk of a man who had rehearsed what he was about to say. "Vivienne, I want you to know this wasn't personal." "I know," she said. "The board felt that given the direction we're taking the company." "Winston," she said quietly, "I'm not asking you to explain." He stopped. That wasn't in the script he'd prepared. He'd expected pushback, or tears, or at minimum for her to make this feel like the significant thing it was. Instead, she was giving him nothing. Not anger, not hurt, just a polite, immovable wall. He told her the transition package would reflect her contribution. "Send it to my attorney," she said. He asked if there was anything she needed. "No," she said. He told her, at the door, that the work she had done was exceptional. And she looked at him and said, "I know that too." She meant it as the quiet devastation it was. There was one other person still in the room. A woman named Dessa Okafor, the only other person of color on the board. Someone Vivienne had mentored for 3 years. Advocated for in runes Dessa didn't know about. Vouched for more times than she could count. Dessa had been one of the 2 votes against removing her. She was standing in the corner like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "Vivienne," she said, "I tried. In the pre-meeting before you got there, I told them, Dessa." Vivienne stood up, straightened her jacket. The same unhurried movement she made every morning before walking into that building. "How you vote in a room where it doesn't count," she said, "is easy. I already knew what you would have done if it did." That landed. Dessa had no answer for it. Vivienne picked up her leather folder, the one she had carried into that building for 11 years, and she walked out. Even steps on marble, completely steady. In the elevator, alone, she exhaled once, long and slow. And for just a few seconds, in a metal box between floors where no one could see her, her hands shook. Then she made them stop. She scrolled to a contact. Press call. The name on the screen was Laurel Voss. 2 days later, the company held its annual investor reception at the Langham Hotel. A formal evening. Limited partners, family offices, institutional investors. The kind of event where the company put its best face forward. Vivienne had not been invited. She came anyway. She wore a deep burgundy dress. Her hair was immaculate. She arrived with her oldest friend, a private equity attorney named Gerald Osei, who had legitimate business with 3 of the investors in that room. She was, technically, a guest. She moved through that reception like she owned it. Because in every way that mattered, she still did. She knew every face, every limited partner, every silent investor. She had personally cultivated half the relationships in that room over years of careful, patient work that no press release could hand to Frederick Bear overnight. Douglas Holt spotted her from across the room. The look on his face, she caught it and filed it away without expression. One of the investors, a woman named Carol Mance from a family office in Atlanta, saw Vivienne and immediately crossed the room to embrace her. They were mid-conversation when Frederick Baird appeared. He was younger than she'd expected. He moved with the ease of a man who had never once walked into a room and wondered whether he belonged. He introduced himself to Carol Mance smoothly, warmly, and then he looked at Vivienne, the woman whose office he now occupied, whose files he had inherited, whose 11 years of institutional knowledge had been handed to him like a set of keys, and he smiled. "Yes, I'm familiar with our former coup." "Vivienne, Good to see you're keeping busy. Former. In front of a major investor. Like she was already a footnote. Carol Mance blinked. She looked at Vivienne. Vivienne's expression did not shift by a single degree. Frederick, she said, congratulations on the role. She extended her hand. He shook it. Brief, perfunctory, and then turned his back to her and steered Carol away to discuss Q3 projections. Mid-sentence, like Vivienne had simply ceased to exist. Gerald appeared at her side. We can leave, he said quietly. We're not leaving, she said. She picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray, took one sip, and stayed exactly where she was. Later that evening, in a private room off the main hall, Gerald gave her the confirmation. 62%. Laurel Voss's firm had acquired 62% of Carlyle's secondary debt position at a significant discount because the institutional holders had been quietly panicking and selling. The kind of quiet panic that happens when people who understand financial structures sense something is wrong and don't know who to call about it. 3 weeks ago, they would have known exactly who to call. Here is what the board had not understood when they voted her out: that debt covenant problem. The one she had brought to Whitfield with a remediation plan. The one he had thanked her for and then used against her. Did not disappear when they removed her. It sat in a file. It waited. And Frederick Baird's new team, assembled quickly and confidently, didn't know it was there. Or more precisely, one of them sensed something was off. But he was 28 years old and didn't know which number to watch. The debt started moving. Pinnacle Equity Group noticed. So did Vivienne. She had seen this coming before they even took the vote. Maybe that was why she had been so still in that boardroom. She wasn't sitting there absorbing a loss. She was running numbers in her head that they didn't know existed. 3 days before the vote, she had called Laurel Voss. Not out of anger, out of calculation. The secondary debt was becoming available as institutional holders quietly hedged their exposure. The price was dropping. She ran the numbers, and she moved. Legally, cleanly, the way she had always done everything in that building. With 62% of the debt, Gerald said, you control the covenant. Which means when the fund triggers, I'm at the table, Vivienne said. Not as a guest, as a creditor. And depending on how the trigger resolves, I have the right to restructure. Gerald looked at her for a long moment. Vivienne, do you understand what that means? It means I loan it, Gerald. Silence. They're going to fight you. Let them, she said. She looked at the closed door. On the other side of it, Frederick Baird was charming investors. Winston Whitfield was giving a toast. Douglas Holt was laughing at something. How long? She asked. If the covenant triggers at quarter end, 90 days. Maybe less. Then I have 90 days, she said, to be completely quiet. She opened the door and walked back into the reception like nothing had happened. If you've ever been walked out of a room that needed you more than it knew, comment below. Keep watching. This is where it changes. The next 90 days, Vivienne Cole was a ghost. No LinkedIn posts, no interviews. When a trade publication ran a piece calling her departure mutually agreed upon, she didn't respond. She let it run. She let people assume whatever they were going to assume. Silence, she had learned long ago, was not the same thing as absence. Week 2, Frederick Baird assembled his operations team. 3 of them couldn't have defined a covenant ratio. One of them could, but he was 28 and nobody had pointed him at the right page. Week 4, Whitfield had lunch with an old contact who mentioned, casually, that he'd heard Vivienne was consulting for Pinnacle Equity. Whitfield laughed it off. Pinnacle was a creditor firm, not a competitor. He didn't make any calls. Week 6, Dessa called. I heard something, Dessa said. About the fund. Vivienne, are you okay? Because if something is it. I'm fine, Dessa. How are you? Dessa went quiet. She knew that voice. What did you do? A long pause. I protected myself, Vivienne said. Like I should have done years ago. They're going to say. I know what they're going to say. Is it too late? Dessa said quietly for me to. Dessa, don't. She ended the call. Kate, Frederick Baird reviewed the quarterly report. Signed off. He did not see the covenant language on page 47. His predecessor would have caught it in 30 seconds. Week 11, Gerald sent one text, one word. Soon. Vivienne read it, set her phone down, went back to her book. She had been sleeping well. Day 89. The covenant triggered at 6:47 in the morning. By 7:15, the fund's legal counsel was calling Whitfield. By 7:30, Whitfield was calling Holt. By 8 o'clock, someone had traced the debt position, and a very different kind of quiet had settled over the 42nd floor. Holt walked into Whitfield's office. She holds 62% of the secondary debt. Whitfield stared at him. That's not possible. It's in the filing, Winston. It's done. She started buying, Reed said from the doorway, the week after the vote. Nobody spoke. Whitfield said slowly she knew. She already knew, when she was sitting in that room. She probably knew, Holt said before we took the vote. What does this mean for Baird? Reed asked. It means Frederick doesn't have a company. Whitfield walked to the window. 42 stories below, Chicago moved the way cities do. Completely indifferent to whatever was unraveling above it. Call her, he said. Winston. Call her, Douglas. Vivienne's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Set it face down. Let it ring. Picked it up on the fourth ring. Winston, she said. He told her they needed to talk. She said she knew. He started explaining the situation. The covenant, the morning's events, as though she might not be fully aware. She stopped him. I don't want to hear what you intended. I don't want to hear what you regret. I've had 11 years of hearing what you intended. Silence. My attorney will contact your board this afternoon. The restructuring terms are straightforward. I'm not interested in litigation. I'm interested in an outcome. What outcome? Controlling interest, executive authority. A board reconstitution with majority approval rights belonging to the new ownership group. A long pause. You're buying the company, he said. I'm restructuring the debt I already hold into equity. Technically, Winston, I already own it. Nothing from him. You have until Friday. She ended the call. Outside her window it was an ordinary Tuesday morning. She poured a second cup of coffee and sat at her kitchen table, and for the first time in 11 years she had nowhere she was required to be. She gave herself 30 seconds. Then she opened her laptop. There was a lot of work to do. That evening, Gerald was at her dining table with documents spread everywhere. They had been working for hours. The room had the feeling of something real being built from the wreckage of something that was supposed to have finished her. They're going to say you planned this from the beginning, Gerald said without looking up. I did plan it from the beginning, she said. They're going to say it wasn't ethical. I purchased debt on the open market using money I earned. I was under no legal or contractual obligation to disclose my personal investments. Everything I did was legal and clean. I know that, Gerald said. I'm telling you what they'll say. She looked up. Gerald, they held a vote to remove me. They sent out a press release before I left the building. They shook my hand and told me my work was exceptional and then handed my company to a man who doesn't know it like I do. A beat. What would they like me to have done? He didn't answer. There was no answer. He asked her softly how she was, honestly. She set down her pen. She thought about 11 years of early mornings. Rooms that talked over her, knowing she had to be not just good but extraordinary just to be considered adequate. A plaque in a lobby with a number she built and a name that wasn't hers. An elevator. 30 seconds of shaking hands that she had stopped by sheer will. "I'm angry," she said. "I've been angry for a long time. I just finally gave myself permission to do something with it." He nodded. That was honest. That was enough. Her phone lit up. Whitfield again. She turned it face down, picked up her pen. Drop a comment if this hit somewhere real. She didn't beg. She didn't fight the vote. She built something they couldn't undo. Keep watching. Friday morning, the boardroom, 42nd floor. Vivienne walked in first. Not early, exactly on time. Whitfield was already seated. Holt, Reid, Frederick Baird was not there. He had resigned Thursday afternoon, before the terms were even finalized. The press release went out at 4 p.m. She had read it on her phone in the parking garage and felt nothing at all. Not satisfaction, not sympathy. Nothing. Which told her everything she needed to know about how long she had been preparing for this moment. She sat at the head of the table. Gerald Doucet to her right, Laurel Voss to her left. The board members looked at her, then looked away. Whitfield began, "I want to say, before we begin, that the board recognizes—" "Winston, we're not doing that part." He stopped. "You have counsel. I have counsel. We have terms. Let's work." Holt opened his mouth. She said without looking at him, "Douglas, don't." He closed it. They worked for 3 hours, not a conversation. A negotiation, conducted by a woman who knew every line of that company's financial structure from memory. Without notes, without hesitation. At one point Holt challenged a term in the restructuring language, and she corrected him from memory, and the room went quiet in a way that was different from before. It wasn't the quiet of men deciding something was finished. It was the quiet of men understanding what they had voted out of that room 93 days ago. Reid, who had not spoken all morning, wrote something on his notepad, folded it, did not pass it to anyone. By early afternoon, it was done. Signatures, notaries. Gerald collected everything. Whitfield stood slowly. He looked older than he had the last time she was in this room. "I hope genuinely that you'll consider this a new chapter, that whatever happened Winston," she said, "I am the new chapter." She picked up her leather folder. The same one, 11 years old. She looked around the room once, slowly. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She did not give them the satisfaction of either. What she gave them instead was something more expensive. Her complete and total indifference to their discomfort. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on it. In the lobby below, there was a plaque. $400 million. A number she had built from 30 million. Her name had never been on it. "I'll need that plaque updated," she said, "by Monday." She walked out. The door closed. The room was very quiet. Nobody laughed. Vivienne Cole did not fight the vote. She didn't post. She didn't protest. She didn't ask anyone to see her, validate her, or acknowledge what had been done to her. She just did what she had always done. She understood that company better than anyone in that building. And this time, she used that understanding entirely for herself. They counted the votes. She controlled the terms. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been the most qualified person in a room that still found a way to look past you, you already know what Vivienne knew walking out of that boardroom. Being underestimated is only a disadvantage if you let them see you counting. Thank you for watching Golden Heart Stories. Subscribe if this moved you. New stories drop every week. The playlist is right there if you want to stay a while. We'll see you in the next one.